A millionaire collapses at a rural clinic and falls in love with the only nurse who didn't recognize. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Emma Brooks had no idea that today would be different from any other day. She was just doing her usual shift at the rural clinic, handling patients who came in with common colds, the occasional sprained ankle, and the random case of stomach flu. But today, things were about to change in the most unexpected way. The small clinic in the heart of the countryside was quiet, the air filled with the usual sounds of murmured conversations and the soft rustling of papers. Emma adjusted her worn-out scrubs, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face as she prepared for the next patient. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work, and it was all she had. As she made her way to the front desk, the door swung open with a soft bell chime, and a man staggered inside. He was tall, with dark, neatly combed hair and a suit that, though it looked out of place in the small clinic, wasn't enough to disguise the exhaustion on his face. Before she could react, the man collapsed onto the floor, his body hitting the tiles with a loud thud. Emma froze for a split second, her heart racing. It wasn't the first time she'd had an emergency, but something about this man felt different. Quickly, snapping out of her shock, she rushed over to him, kneeling beside him. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice calm despite the panic rising in her chest. His eyes fluttered open briefly, meeting hers, but he couldn't respond before his body went limp again. Without thinking, she gently lifted his head, feeling for any signs of life. The clinic was understaffed, and the nearest hospital was miles away, but Emma had been trained for situations like this. She called for help, her voice steady as she directed the few nurses available to assist. As she worked, Emma didn't take a second to consider who this man was or what he might have been doing here. She focused only on helping him. In that moment, nothing else mattered. She was a nurse, and he was a patient. That was all. I will begin where we left off. As the minutes ticked by, Emma worked tirelessly, trying to stabilize the man who had collapsed in the clinic. His pulse was weak, but it was there. The man's face was pale, and his breathing shallow. But Emma remained calm, focusing solely on keeping him alive. It was a skill she had honed over the years, the ability to detach emotionally in times of crisis, focusing only on the task at hand. As she checked his vitals, she couldn't help but notice how out of place he looked in the small, rundown clinic. His expensive suit, pressed perfectly, seemed entirely at odds with the humble surroundings. But that wasn't important now. What mattered was that he was alive, and she was determined to keep it that way. After what seemed like an eternity, the man's breathing began to even out, and his color started to return. Emma breathed a sigh of relief, her heart still racing but now with a sense of accomplishment. She gently adjusted his position, making sure he was as comfortable as possible. It was then that she noticed something strange. His hand, which had been limp just moments before, tightened around her wrist, surprising her. His eyes fluttered open again, this time with more focus. "Who are you?" he whispered hoarsely, his voice barely audible. Emma hesitated for a second, her brow furrowing in confusion. "I'm Emma," she replied gently, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You're at a clinic. You collapsed. You're safe now." He blinked, still not fully awake, his eyes not quite registering what she was saying. He seemed disoriented, but there was something about the way he looked at her that made Emma feel uneasy. It was as though he was trying to remember something important. I don't know what happened," he mumbled. "Where am I?" "You're at the clinic," Emma repeated, her voice soothing. "But you're going to be okay. Just take it easy." He closed his eyes for a moment, clearly exhausted, before his grip on her wrist loosened. As he drifted back into unconsciousness, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man than what met the eye. For the rest of the day, Emma stayed by his side, making sure he had everything he needed, monitoring his vitals closely. The clinic was quiet, and with most of the staff tending to other patients, it gave her plenty of time to reflect. She had helped countless people throughout her career, but something about this man was different. She couldn't explain it, but he felt important. Not in the way some of the regular patients she saw every day were important, but there was something about his presence, even in his unconscious state, that felt significant. Hours later, when the man finally began to stir again, Emma was there, her watchful eyes never leaving him. He looked around the room, taking in his surroundings, and then his gaze locked onto her. "Who are you really?" he asked, his voice much stronger now. Emma was taken aback by the question. She hadn't expected him to ask anything more than, "Where am I?" She smiled gently, brushing aside the thought of answering him with a simple, "I'm just a nurse." "I'm just a nurse," she said softly, keeping her tone warm. "But you're safe now. That's all that matters." His lips twitched into a faint smile, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something Emma couldn't quite place. He seemed to be studying her, as though he was trying to figure something out. It made her feel uneasy, but she pushed it aside, focusing on his recovery. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Emma nodded, not sure how to respond. He had just collapsed in front of her, and now he was thanking her, as though she had done something extraordinary. It was hard for her to accept compliments. She was just doing her job, after all. But as she looked at him, lying there in the clinic bed, she realized something. This man wasn't just a stranger who had stumbled into the clinic. There was something about him, something in the way he spoke, that made her think he wasn't like the other patients she'd treated. He wasn't just anyone. I will continue the story from where we left off. As the days passed, the man, whose name Emma had learned was Daniel, continued to recover in the clinic. Each day, Emma found herself spending more time with him, but still, she remained focused on her work. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about him. It wasn't just the way he looked at her or how he'd thank her after every small thing she did for him. It was something deeper, something that made her wonder about his life before the collapse. As she adjusted his IV drip one morning, Daniel asked, "Emma, can I ask you something?" His voice was steadier now, no longer weak and hoarse. She smiled and nodded, setting the needle aside. "Of course," she said, glancing up at him. He hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers. "Why did you help me?" he asked, his expression unreadable. "You didn't know who I was. Most people would have just called for an ambulance and left it at that." Emma paused, surprised by the question. She wasn't used to people asking her why she did the right thing. "I'm a nurse," she replied simply. "It's my job to help people, no matter who they are." Daniel looked at her for a long time, his gaze thoughtful. "You're different," he said quietly. "Most people would have been more concerned about who I was, but you just helped me." Emma blushed slightly, her hands folding nervously in her lap. "I don't see why it matters who you are. You were in trouble, and I did what any decent person would do." Daniel smiled, but there was something more to it. He seemed impressed, almost moved by her answer. For the first time, Emma felt like she wasn't just the nurse who took care of patients. She was someone who had made a difference. As the days went by, Daniel's condition continued to improve, and with each passing day, their conversations grew deeper. He would often ask her about her life, about her dreams, and the struggles she faced in the small town where she worked. He was genuinely interested, and Emma found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. She told him about her childhood, how she had always dreamed of becoming a nurse, and how she worked hard every day to make ends meet. She spoke of the challenges she faced, living paycheck to paycheck, and how she longed for a better life. Daniel listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers. There was a warmth in his gaze that made Emma feel like she mattered, something she hadn't felt in a long time. One afternoon, as Emma was sitting by his bedside, Daniel reached out and gently took her hand. She looked up, startled by the gesture. "I know this might sound crazy," he said, "but I want to help you." Emma furrowed her brow, confused. "Help me? What do you mean?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, then said, "I've seen how hard you work, how much you give to others, and I want to make sure you get the life you deserve. You shouldn't have to struggle like this." Emma felt her heart skip a beat. She had never expected someone like Daniel to say something like that to her. "I don't need help," she said, pulling her hand away gently. "I'm fine." But Daniel's expression remained steady, his hand still hovering in the air, as though waiting for her to accept. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. Emma's eyes softened as she looked at him. There was sincerity in his words, a kind of kindness she hadn't encountered in a long time. She had always been the one helping others, never asking for anything in return. But here was a man who seemed to genuinely want to offer her something more, something she didn't even know she needed. She swallowed, unsure of what to say. I don't know," she admitted. "I've always done everything on my own." Daniel's smile grew a little wider, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I know you have," he said gently, "but maybe it's time to let someone else help you." Emma didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't used to depending on anyone, especially not someone like Daniel. But his words lingered in her mind long after she left the clinic that evening. For the first time in a long time, she began to wonder if maybe she deserved a little help after all. I will continue the story from where we left off. A few days after their conversation, Emma couldn't stop thinking about Daniel's offer. It seemed too good to be true, and she wasn't sure she could trust him. She had spent most of her life relying only on herself, and the thought of someone helping her, especially a man like Daniel, was both comforting and terrifying. She was used to being the one who helped others, the one who fixed things, the one who made sure everyone else was okay. But now, here was Daniel, someone who seemed to care about her without any strings attached, offering to make her life better. It wasn't that she didn't want help. It was just that she had never been in a position to accept it. That evening, as she sat by his bedside, Daniel noticed the uncertainty in her eyes. He didn't push her, but his gaze was steady, like he was waiting for her to make up her mind. "Emma," he said quietly, "I know this is a lot to ask, but I really mean what I said. You don't have to keep carrying all of this on your own." Emma bit her lip, trying to figure out how to respond. She had been raised to be independent, to never rely on anyone. But here was Daniel, a stranger, telling her that it was okay to lean on him. And it was tempting, more tempting than anything she had ever felt before. "I don't know if I can just accept your help," she said softly. "It feels like I'd be taking advantage of you." Daniel shook his head, his expression kind but firm. "No, Emma," he said, his voice soft but insistent. "You wouldn't be taking advantage of me. You've worked hard your whole life, and you deserve to have someone help you for once. There's no shame in that." Emma looked away, her thoughts a whirlwind. It was so hard to let go of the walls she had built around herself, to allow someone in, especially someone who could change everything for her. "I don't even know how I would start," she whispered. "I've never needed anyone like this before." Daniel's smile was understanding, as though he knew exactly what she was going through. "You don't have to start anywhere," he said gently. "You just have to trust me. Let me help you, even if it's just a little bit at first. I promise I won't ask for anything in return." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so many years pushing people away, so many years making sure she never needed anyone, that the idea of accepting help felt foreign, almost wrong. But something in Daniel's words struck a chord deep inside her. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to think about the possibility of change, of a life where she didn't have to do everything alone. "Okay," she said softly, the words barely escaping her lips. "I'll let you help me. But just a little." Daniel's eyes lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "You won't regret it, I promise." Over the next few weeks, Daniel kept his word. He didn't try to push her too hard, and he never made her feel like she owed him anything. Instead, he simply helped in the quietest, most unobtrusive ways. He paid for her groceries when they ran into each other in town, insisted on driving her home after long shifts at the clinic, and even offered her a small loan to cover her bills when things got tight. Slowly but surely, Emma started to feel the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. It wasn't just the financial help that made the difference. It was the emotional support, the understanding, and the care that Daniel showed her. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone. She wasn't sure what to make of her growing feelings for him. He was kind, generous, and unlike anyone she had ever known, but she wasn't sure if she was ready for something more. But as time passed, those feelings only deepened, and she began to realize that there was more to Daniel than just his wealth. He was a man who cared about her in a way no one ever had, and for the first time, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved someone like him. One evening, After a particularly long day at the clinic, Daniel invited Emma to dinner at a small restaurant in town. It was nothing fancy, but the gesture felt significant, and Emma was touched by the thoughtfulness behind it. As they sat across from each other, talking and laughing like old friends, Emma found herself feeling more at ease than she had in years. It was the first time she had allowed herself to truly enjoy a meal with someone else, without worrying about what she would do next or how she would get by. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she was allowed to take a break, to breathe, and to just enjoy the moment. I will continue the story from where we left off. As the weeks passed, Emma began to adjust to the new rhythm of her life. It wasn't just about the small acts of kindness from Daniel, though they were certainly part of it. It was about how he made her feel seen, like she mattered. Not just as a nurse, but as a person. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she wasn't just going through the motions of life. She was living. The clinic was still demanding. The long hours still stretched her thin. But something about Daniel's support, his quiet presence, made everything easier. She found herself looking forward to their conversations, the way he always seemed to understand exactly what she needed to hear. It wasn't just that he was a millionaire, someone with the means to help her out financially. It was that he genuinely cared about her well-being, about her dreams. One afternoon, after a particularly exhausting shift, Daniel showed up at the clinic unexpectedly. He had his usual warm smile on, but there was something different about the way he looked at her today. "Emma," he said, his voice softer than usual, "I've been thinking about something." Emma raised an eyebrow, feeling a flutter in her chest at the thought of what he might say next. "What's on your mind?" she asked, wiping her hands on her scrub pants before walking over to him. He hesitated for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "I've been traveling a lot for business lately, but I've been thinking it's time for a change. I want to spend more time here, with you," he said, his eyes locking with hers. Emma's heart skipped a beat. "With me?" she repeated, slightly taken aback by the sudden confession. Daniel nodded, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Yes, Emma. I've been busy building my empire for so long that I've forgotten what it feels like to slow down and enjoy life. And I want to do that with you." Emma felt a rush of emotions, a mixture of happiness, confusion, and disbelief. This was the man who had helped her in ways she never thought possible, the man who had given her space to breathe and think about her future. And now he was telling her that he wanted to be part of that future, to spend more time with her. It was overwhelming, in the best possible way. "But I'm just a nurse," Emma whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel reached out and gently cupped her cheek, his touch warm and reassuring. "You're not just anything, Emma," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "You're the woman who's made me realize that life isn't just about what we achieve, but about who we share it with. And I want to share my life with you." Emma's heart raced as she stared into his eyes. She had never felt more seen, more understood. It was as though Daniel saw something in her that she had never fully seen in herself. It wasn't about her job, her struggles, or even the money. It was about her heart, her spirit. For the first time, Emma felt like she wasn't just a caretaker for others. She was someone worthy of care, too. I don't know what to say," Emma admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "You've done so much for me already. I never expected any of this." Daniel smiled, his thumb gently brushing her cheek. "You don't have to say anything. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. We can take things slow, Emma. There's no pressure. I just want to be part of your life, in whatever way feels right for you." Emma swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to escape. She had spent so long keeping her guard up, convinced that she didn't deserve happiness, but Daniel's words were slowly chipping away at that belief. Maybe she did deserve this kind of love, this kind of partnership. Maybe it wasn't too late for her to have everything she had ever dreamed of. "Okay," she said, her voice barely audible. "Let's see where this goes." Daniel's smile widened, and for the first time, Emma saw something beyond his wealth and success. She saw the man who wanted to be with her, the man who cared about her as much as she cared about him. And in that moment, Emma realized that she wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was someone who deserved to be loved, just as she was. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in her life, allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future with him. I will continue the story from where we left off. After that conversation, Emma couldn't help but feel like she was walking on air. For the first time in a long time, the weight she had been carrying, the heavy burden of isolation and self-doubt, seemed a little lighter. She found herself smiling more often, her thoughts drifting to Daniel and the promise he had made to be there for her, to help her, and to walk beside her in whatever future they created together. Emma still wasn't entirely sure how everything would play out, but for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. The next few days passed in a blur. Emma continued with her routine at the clinic, but now, whenever Daniel's name crossed her mind, she felt a warmth spread through her chest. Their connection was undeniable, and she knew deep down that she was beginning to feel something much deeper for him than she had expected. One evening, after a particularly tiring day at the clinic, Emma was surprised when Daniel showed up at her apartment, holding a small bouquet of flowers. His presence was a comfort, and she couldn't help but feel a rush of emotions at the sight of him standing there, smiling softly at her. "I thought you could use a little brightness in your day," Daniel said, handing her the flowers. Emma took them, her heart swelling at the thoughtfulness behind the gesture. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She had never had anyone do something so simple, yet so meaningful for her. It was the kind of thing she had only dreamed about, and here it was, in front of her. Daniel stepped inside, and for the next few hours, they talked about everything and nothing at all. They shared stories about their childhoods, their hopes, their dreams, and even their fears. Daniel opened up in ways Emma hadn't expected, revealing bits and pieces of his life that she hadn't known. He told her about the struggles he had faced while building his company, the sacrifices he had made, and the loneliness that had often come with his success. Emma listened intently, her heart softening even more as she realized just how much Daniel had overcome to get where he was. He wasn't just a wealthy man. He was someone who had worked tirelessly for everything he had, someone who had earned his place in the world. And despite all of his success, he still wanted to be with her, a small-town nurse who had always felt like she didn't belong. As they sat together, the evening wore on, and Emma felt a sense of peace she had never known before. There was no rush, no pressure to figure everything out. For the first time, she felt like she could just be herself, without worrying about her past or her insecurities. Daniel made her feel like she was enough, just as she was. A few days later, as Emma was finishing up her shift at the clinic, Daniel came to see her again. This time, he had something different in mind. He asked her to take a walk with him in the park, a place they had both visited before, but this time it felt different. There was a quiet energy between them, an unspoken understanding that something was shifting, something important. As they walked through the park, their hands brushed against each other, and Emma couldn't help but feel a spark. It was the simplest touch, but it sent a thrill through her that made her heart race. She glanced up at Daniel, her breath catching in her throat, and for the first time, she realized that she wasn't just falling for him. She was already there. She had already let herself care for him in a way she never thought possible. "Emma," Daniel said softly, breaking the silence. "I know we've been taking things slow, and I want you to know that I respect that. But I also want you to know that I'm serious about us. I want to build a life with you." His words hung in the air, and for a moment Emma didn't know what to say. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she didn't feel afraid. For the first time, she felt like she had found someone who saw her, who understood her, and who genuinely wanted to be by her side. I feel the same way," Emma whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. She had never said those words to anyone before, not like this, but with Daniel, it felt right. "I'm ready, Daniel." He smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made Emma's heart flutter. "You won't regret it," he promised, squeezing her hand gently. "I'll make sure of it." The rest of the walk passed in a comfortable silence, but Emma couldn't help but feel like this was the beginning of something beautiful. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to find out. With Daniel by her side, she felt like anything was possible. I will continue the story from where we left off. As Emma and Daniel grew closer, their connection only deepened, and each day together felt more meaningful than the last. Emma found herself beginning to trust Daniel in ways she hadn't with anyone before. She had always kept her guard up, afraid of getting hurt, afraid of depending on someone else. But Daniel was different. His presence was reassuring, And slowly, Emma allowed herself to open up more, sharing things about her past that she had never spoken about to anyone. She told him about her struggles growing up, the hardships she faced to get to where she was, and the dreams she still had for the future. Daniel listened with the utmost patience and care, never judging her, always offering support. He seemed to understand her better than anyone ever had, and for the first time, Emma felt truly seen. But even with everything growing between them, Emma couldn't shake the lingering fear that things were moving too fast. She had never been in a relationship like this, one where there was so much at stake. Daniel was everything she had ever dreamed of, kind, generous, and caring, but she couldn't help but worry that it was all too good to be true. One evening, after a quiet dinner at a local restaurant, Emma found herself lost in thought, her mind racing with doubts. Daniel, noticing the change in her mood, reached across the table and gently took her hand. "Emma, what's on your mind?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. Emma looked up at him, her heart heavy. I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scared of what?" Daniel asked, his gaze never leaving hers. "Of everything," Emma replied. "Of how fast things are moving, of how much I care about you, and I guess I'm afraid that maybe I'm not enough for you." Daniel's expression softened, and he squeezed her hand. "Emma, you are more than enough. You always have been," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "You don't have to be anything more than yourself with me. I've never asked for anything else." Emma felt a lump form in her throat as she listened to him, the weight of her fears slowly lifting. She had spent so many years believing that she wasn't good enough, that her past made her unworthy of love. But Daniel's words gave her a glimpse of a different reality, one where she didn't have to carry those burdens anymore. "But what if I mess up?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if I ruin this?" Daniel shook his head, his eyes filled with understanding. "We're both human, Emma. We're not perfect, but that's okay," he said gently. "What matters is that we're here for each other, through the good and the bad. And no matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere." Emma's heart swelled with emotion at his words. It was hard to believe that someone could feel so strongly about her, but the sincerity in Daniel's voice made her believe in the possibility. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have the kind of love she had always dreamed of. The next few weeks were filled with moments of quiet happiness. Emma and Daniel continued to grow closer, supporting each other in ways they hadn't imagined before. Emma helped Daniel with his charity work, something he was passionate about, and they spent countless hours talking about their goals and aspirations for the future. As they shared more of themselves with each other, Emma realized that she wasn't just falling in love with Daniel, she was building a life with him, a life she had never thought possible. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of Emma's small apartment, Daniel took her hand and looked at her with a soft, knowing smile. "You're everything I've been looking for, Emma," he said quietly, his voice full of emotion. "I've never met anyone like you, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." Emma looked at him, her heart racing as she felt the weight of his words sink in. "I feel the same way," she whispered, tears threatening to fall. "I never thought I'd find someone like you." Daniel smiled warmly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You don't have to be afraid anymore, Emma," he said softly. "You're not alone, and you never will be again." In that moment, Emma realized that the love she had always longed for was no longer just a dream. It was real, and it was right in front of her. She had found the man who loved her, accepted her, and wanted to build a future with her. And for the first time in her life, Emma felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. I will continue the story from where we left off. As time went on, Emma and Daniel's relationship grew even stronger. They had found a rhythm in their lives. And despite the challenges they both faced, they were learning to navigate them together. Emma still worked long hours at the clinic, but now there was a sense of balance. She no longer felt like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Daniel's support had made all the difference, and it was clear that he wasn't just interested in her for her job or her past. He was there because he genuinely cared about her as a person. One evening, after a long day, Daniel invited Emma to dinner at one of their favorite spots in town. The restaurant was small, cozy, and familiar, a place where they had shared many meals before, but tonight felt different. As they sat across from each other, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She knew something was coming, but she wasn't prepared for the moment to arrive so soon. Daniel smiled softly as he placed the box in front of her, his eyes filled with emotion. "Emma," he said, his voice steady but full of warmth, "I've spent so much time thinking about this, about us, and I realized that I don't want to wait any longer. You've shown me what it means to love and to be loved, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Emma blinked in surprise, her mind racing as she stared at the small box before her. It felt like the world had stopped, and for a brief moment, all she could do was look at Daniel, her emotions swirling inside her. She never imagined that this day would come, that someone like Daniel, someone with so much to offer, would want to share his life with her. The woman who had always felt unworthy of love, the woman who had carried the weight of her past for so long. And yet, here he was, offering her a future she had never dreamed possible. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. I don't know what to say." Daniel's smile softened, and he reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You don't have to say anything if you're not ready," he said, his voice full of understanding. "I just want you to know that no matter what you choose, I'll always be here, supporting you." Emma took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never felt more alive, more sure of anything in her life. Daniel had shown her a love she never thought possible, and in return, she had come to love him deeply. She realized that there was no doubt in her mind that she wanted to be with him, to spend every day by his side, building a future together. "Yes," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Daniel's face lit up, his eyes shining with joy. He stood up, taking her hands in his, and pulled her into a warm embrace. The room around them seemed to fade away, and all that mattered was the two of them in that moment. The man who had taught her to believe in herself, and the woman who had found a love she had always longed for. "I promise you," Daniel whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I'll spend every day for the rest of my life showing you how much I love you." Emma smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks as she held him tightly. "I believe you," she whispered back. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of happiness and excitement. Emma couldn't stop smiling as Daniel held her hand, his love and support evident in every gesture. The world seemed brighter, and for the first time, Emma truly believed in the possibility of a future that was full of love, hope, and endless possibilities. As they left the restaurant, hand in hand, Emma realized that she had found everything she had ever wanted, and more. She had found a man who loved her for who she was, who had given her the chance to be herself and to dream again. She had found a home in his arms, a place where she felt safe, loved, and accepted. And for the first time in her life, Emma was no longer afraid of the future. She was ready to face it with Daniel by her side, ready to embrace the life they would build together, one step at a time. I will continue the story from where we left off. The weeks following Emma's acceptance of Daniel's proposal were filled with a whirlwind of joy and preparation. The clinic, while still demanding, no longer felt like the weight it once had. Emma had found a balance, knowing that she had a partner to share her burdens with. Daniel's support, his love, and his quiet presence in her life had given her the strength she had long lacked. He stood by her side every step of the way, whether it was helping with the wedding plans or simply being there when the stress of her job weighed heavily on her. As they prepared for their small, intimate wedding, Emma couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the love that had surrounded her. It wasn't just from Daniel, though that was more than enough. It was also the support from her friends, from her community, and even from her patients who had come to know her as more than just the nurse at the clinic. They had become her family. On the day of the wedding, Emma stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the simple white dress that Daniel had helped pick out. It wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect for the life they had built together. She smiled at her reflection, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. Daniel had been right. She was enough, and he loved her for who she was. She wasn't defined by her past or by the struggles she had faced. She was simply Emma, the woman who had found love when she least expected it. The ceremony was held at a small chapel just outside town, surrounded by the people who meant the most to them. As she walked down the aisle, Emma couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face. She locked eyes with Daniel, standing at the altar, and everything else faded away. There was no room for doubt, no room for fear. There was only the certainty that they belonged together. Daniel's smile was just as bright as hers, and when the officiant asked if they would take each other as partners for life, Emma's voice was steady and clear. "I do," she said, her heart full. The words had never felt more true. When Daniel repeated his vows to her, his voice trembled with emotion, and Emma felt her heart swell with love. It wasn't just the vows that moved her. It was the depth of the promise behind them. She knew that no matter what came their way, they would face it together. After the ceremony, as they walked out of the chapel hand in hand, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything. The world felt perfect in that moment. Daniel leaned down and whispered in her ear, "You make everything in my life better, Emma. I love you." Emma squeezed his hand, looking up at him with all the love she had in her heart. "I love you too," she whispered back. And for the first time in her life, Emma truly believed it. She had spent so many years hiding from love, afraid of what it would mean to open up. But with Daniel, she had learned that love wasn't something to fear. It was something to embrace, something to build a life around. As they left the chapel, surrounded by their friends and family, Emma felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had found the kind of love she had always dreamed of, the kind of love that didn't just change her life, it gave her a new one. With Daniel by her side, Emma knew that they would create a future full of joy, adventure, and the kind of love that could withstand anything life threw their way. And as they drove off together into the night, Emma couldn't help but feel that the best was yet to come.